how and when their knowledge or what their responsibilities for acting on it were. And we were faced with a real dilemma, which was, if we failed to act on it, adverse possession would swim into view. We either contest it or we run a real serious legal risk of surrendering the public access to it. And that is certainly true once we know about it and fail to react. So the solution of putting a fence, of leaving the fence in place and putting a sign up that welcomed visitors and asked them to be respectful, as indeed all visitors had, to our knowledge, historically been, seemed an ideal compromise. And I think at the point that, while we spent more money getting to that point than we had dreamed, it was nothing like the money we've spent since then. So when that was agreed upon, we thought, however slightly irked we were that it had taken us the effort that and money that it did, that we had resolved it. And we resolved it in a way that did not embarrass our co-members of the association. Everybody that lives here is a member. Didn't embarrass the neighbors. We hadn't named them. We haven't named them yet, but resolved it. And we were perfectly prepared to accept that. Then, to the best of our belief and knowledge, and upon substantial evidence, they destroyed it. That changed the equation in our eyes very deliberately. We were still hopeful that this could be resolved privately and without any further public to-do that would leave them, that would allow their acts to be mitigated privately. That does not appear to be the case. So we've spent a huge amount of time and effort trying to get to that point. And I think that is the point we're at. In terms of if we want to proceed on this, we do have some caps, indeed, but let's not be naive here. Things sometimes cost more than one thinks they do, thinks they will. We could easily spend another $20,000 in this effort. And Peggy, are my reports as accurate as far as you know generally?
Yes.
And we are certainly not unaware of it, and we certainly do not take the money lightly. So why would we do it? Well, each board member can address this for themselves after I finish. But I'm going to say that I think that the consensus were several. One is that what is really at issue here, first of all, is the value of the historic monument. That it is a valuable and unique marker in a neighborhood that does not have a lot, in a neighborhood that was founded, that almost ceased to exist 40 years ago, and it has innate and important value in and of itself. That was part of my thinking on it. Secondly, and equally important, is the same reason that we spend, without any public input, specifically, a lot of money on planning issues and a lot of money on other zoning issues, because we know, we feel confident that the principle that underlies them is a critical principle for this neighborhood. It's the rule of order and it's the rule of law. And if our reaction would have been very different if some credible accident had befallen this, but the reaction of these individuals in these circumstances made, in my opinion, responding and following through on the repair and rebuild in an effort to get them to rebuild the monument critical. And the failure to do so, in my opinion, means that we're no longer going to fight, or we're going to put dollar caps on 10th Street and Monroe, or 10th Streets on the issue at Briarcliff. And it is our job to manage the money in a way that makes sure we don't run out of money and that we try to be good stewards of it. But it is also our job under the bylaws and historically to try to deal with these odd and bizarre conditions, while also trying not to embarrass the neighbors. And I will tell you that I found the behaviors surprising and unpredictable, and the outcomes to some degree. So I appreciate your caution about what could happen in the future on that. We have a price from the attorney that we've used for a cap on the future pieces to and including trial. And the number I mentioned is through it.
It sounds like you're going there.
Well, we're certainly going to have examined going there. I mean, we certainly couldn't fail to examine it. Going there, we price a lot of things without going there, but we certainly,
One resolution.
well, it is not a matter of let's just go do it. We don't know what it costs. We don't care. Quite the opposite. We do care. So we've tried to measure that in that context, and you may be sure that in a time when all board members here spend a lot of their time volunteering and trying to maximize income in all kind of ways, that we are quite conscious of what the cost is. But I also think it's possible to look back from this point and see how some things happened and wish that they had happened differently, or predict now that at least with these two individuals, perhaps they would have handled differently. But they had agreed to the resolution. It was done. The money, while more than we would have liked, would not have caught the attention of anyone in the process, and it would have been resolved, and we thought we had that. So that is gone. And the question is, do we stand aside? Broadly, it seems to me, do we stand aside and say, I guess that if you choose, as we believe these folks did, to disregard an agreement you made and destroy a public monument that did not belong to you, that there really may be no financial repercussions from it. Our position is they should rebuild it at their cost. We're happy to put it in the front yard if the family has agreed to that, but they need to rebuild it. We also have asked for some of our legal fees back dating from when the destruction occurred. We have at least spent the ones before that in good faith, and we'll take responsibility for them. Would any board members like to elaborate or add?
I can, if anybody else wants to.
I mean, I personally went and sat through the mediation session, and so having personally invested in Catherine
I did too.
participate in that, and having personally invested my time with that, and thought we were going into it openly and in good faith, it was extremely disappointing because it was a very constructive meeting, and it was very disappointing to having set our next steps very firmly in place and very firmly agreed to get absolutely no response whatsoever.
Well, and one thing that Jack didn't mention was that on top of all of this, in the midst of all of this, the homeowners threatened each member of the board personally, which just added a layer to sue individually the board members. So not only
More than one.
more than once, exactly. And so it's there, as you might imagine, look at the diversity of our backgrounds, right? And this was not an easy decision. And it was a decision that nobody came to lightly. We all live in this neighborhood. We are often standing for hours at Summerfest raising money, the very money that we know that we're ultimately going to have to spend on something like this. But if you don't protect the historic fabric of your neighborhood, you really don't have anything. So I think that's really where we came down on this. But it was a very difficult decision. There's a lot of disagreement. We've sat in this room for hours, considered every conceivable opportunity, every conceivable choice, consulted very good lawyers, thought through the impact, the public impact, the repercussions of spending the money. But the behavior of these two individuals has been so extraordinary. And the damage, the agreement had been agreed upon, and they were negotiating with us even knowing that they had already destroyed the monument. So if you look at the time, I mean, it's really quite an extraordinary experience. And that's what a good, strong board is for, is to address these things. So we don't go lightly into this. And
Can
certainly
we go after title insurance or their homeowners insurance?
that's up to them. That's their
It
responsibility.
covers them, and one of the issues they raised in the mediation was that they were going to try to go after that. We wish them
Sure.
Godspeed on that, but we
But
can't
that's
initiate
independent
that.
of them destroying
We
the
have
monument.
But can't the title family themselves?
No.
The thought that they don't have any claim
They don't
on their
have any
title
claim to that.
insurance.
Right.
I will add that I certainly hope that they will willingly come back to the table. We are ever hopeful that people will come forward and do the right thing and very open to that. And I want to also add that this is not unfamiliar territory for the Civic Association Board. It is because of the Civic Association board back in the 80s that this monument was established and that the history was protected there. It was a hard-fought battle to come up with this compromise, to create this significant historic memorial, which is only 1 year younger than Oakland Cemetery, the first burial there. The reason Hardy Ivy is here is because of Todd. It is, what we have here is very what we had here was very, very special. And people fought a long, hard battle to get that agreement with Sam Dixon, who developed the property back in the 80s. Franklin Garrett visited the site. We talk about hours spent on money that, that we're spending on zoning and planning and everything we do for this neighborhood. That was sweat and tears of our prior, neighbors and board members that made that happen. That is just senselessly gone. And I agree with the thought process that it's important that we stand for what is right and for what is legal, and that we do it as, respectfully as we possibly can, exhibit the best kind of behavior that we can. And, I think we know people that still live in the neighborhood that were on the committee. It was a subcommittee of the Virginia-Highland Civic Association that helped establish that. So I feel like we're following in some footsteps. Unfortunately, this is not something that none of us want to be in this position. We signed up for the board knowing that we're a neighborhood that has always been an activist neighborhood. So we've got some big shoes to fill, but this is tough. This has been tough for everyone to consider.
I'd like to get, Eleanor,
please, Eleanor.
if you want, we'll get to you.
What about the Todd family? What's their current position on it? How much are they involved in this? I mean, I assume
There was a Tom family member at the mediation session.
They're
Okay,
very active.
okay.
We've
Take care of
been
everything
with them in
So
negotiations.
they have pretty much the same, they have the same concerns. There are no actual graves there currently, or were there
That
ever?
that's not, we're not there, there's no certainty about that.
Indeterminate.
There was information that possibly the graves were moved. Research has been done to find out if they were moved, where they were. There was an affidavit signed by someone saying they were moved, but there's no record of them there. But the truth of the matter is, this all got resolved in the late 80s and early 90s when everyone came to the table and said, this is our compromise. The property is developed, whatever is there is there. This is the cemetery memorial. What was to be done by Sam Dixon was to take 8 or 11 spades of earth from the depressions that they believed to be the oldest potential grave sites and bury them in a vault underneath this memorial, the cemetery memorial.
Okay.
So if it's moved, a discovery needs to be made too, as well as is that vault underneath there. But basically that was the agreement, so it's kind of, we can talk about it all day as to whether they are.
But to your question, the family has been right with it. They came back to town for the mediation session, and
Stakeholder.
they're going to be the lead. I mean, when the proposal was, can you put it out front, that was their answer, not ours. I mean, we yield to them on those matters. It is their family. And I'm sorry, Peggy.
If you think about the fabric of our neighborhood, there are a variety of different kinds of easements all over this neighborhood. They affect lots and lots and lots of different houses. And the way to handle easements that affect all of us, that affect the public, that affect lots of property owners, the way to handle those easements is to uphold them. It's not for somebody to threaten legal action against people who want to take advantage of the easement. We can't, the way our neighborhood is laid out, have just random people threatening other people that use this whole network of easements across our neighborhood. So I think we need to uphold that law and those legal agreements around easements. It's not just this one spot, although this is an unusual easement, it's not just this one spot. It's about how you handle easements in a community, legal easements in a community.
Yes,
Could you
ma'am.
describe what the monument or the memorial is?
We have
What? actually, it's on the first page, if you look in the Virginia-Highland history book, it's the first page. There was
There was
stone, is it a sign?
There was
There was a 10 by 10 iron rod gate marking the memorial, and then there was an engraved stone.
And
So it looked like a great, I mean, it looked like a
It
great.
was significant in size. We just have pictures of it, but it was at least 5 feet long and 2.5 feet in diameter, with the names of Richard Todd on one side and Martha Todd on the other. And it was put there in the late 20s as a memorial to their gravesites. So it's historic, was it historic in its own right?
So the engraved marker was not a 1980s thing, it was a
Right.
1920s thing.
And in order to destroy it would have required a gigantic commitment. The claim that it's destroyed by
There's a
vandals.
report of that tool that you just mentioned.
Right.
involved.
It would be impossible. And there was certainly discussion about, did the homeowners know about the easement and the gravesite? And they signed the documents. Other neighbors briefed them. They knew other people had visited. So a claim that they didn't know about it is simply false.
They signed it.
Yeah, they signed them and they signed the paper. So it's very clear. So.
Yes, sir.
My name's Dave Wagner, I'm a resident. I'd like to thank you guys for 2 points. One, well, it's a horrible thing that happened, and I think nobody's bigger than history, and I'm glad that you pursued it, or pursuing it, and I'm glad that we're spending money on it. I'm thankful that you are being transparent and civil in the discussion of the review of how you're spending money, but I'm very thankful that you're doing stuff like this, because it has to be done, and I can't do it. And I appreciate all the effort that you guys have put in and sat through it. It sounds like just a really bummer process. So, thank you.
If anyone wants to cater some meals for us, this meetings have been really long.
All we're getting is dessert from Kathy.
I know, I'm sorry, it's slim on the cookie, but the sugar keeps us going.
Depressing is a good adjective for you.
Did they say what they did with this? It's pretty bad.
They jacked you.
Threw it away?
didn't they?
Yeah.
I'm trying not to go into great detail on their reports.
I mean, if you go into court, you're going to.
We are confident that, I'm trying
You're
to
not
be a little
finding-
careful.
you're not
Confident
finding a
wrong.
single piece.
There will be no difficulty establishing from a variety of sources
There's
exactly.
going to be many little pieces of stone now.
And we, of course, know about it because a neighbor let us know about it in the first place. And so that's the beginning. I want to say that depressing is correct, but whatever happens in the future, the lawsuits is not, the threat of the lawsuits was surprising and amazing to me because we had so demonstrably done none of the things we were alleged to have done. And Mr. Snyder and Mr. Moriarty, so I'll make another point about the money because it has been a factor very much in our minds. Mr. Moriarty is a neighborhood resident. He's the gentleman who took on, because he had a certain interest in it, he backed up to the property and he married the woman who lived on the rear of the property at the mix. But he is the gentleman who took on, without formal compensation, the attempt to preserve the old C1 zoning status there that was the one outlier for all of the neighborhood on the Highland from the NC. And he thought there were legal flaws in the arguments being presented, and he spent a huge amount of time researching and devoting time to that, and in the end, an amiable settlement was reached, as the parties say, in which the C1 zoning was dropped. And we were very, very amiable about that. Dave, he did that on his own. He has provided us, even with the money that we've spent, he has provided us with a discounted rate. So I don't take your remarks about what's this going to cost. Oh, here's the cap. Those are the famous last words before you run off the bridge. Here's what it'll cost. That said, we do have a pretty
No,
good,
a range is, I mean, I understand you
Yeah.
can't fully quantify
Right.
litigation,
That's
because
right.
that's the way you go. But if we're seeking to really truly enforce an easement and you're somewhere in between stopping, means you weren't successful in what you started to pursue. So I don't know if there's a stopping point. I mean, I haven't been privy to that. I just wondered out of curiosity.
well, I'm letting you know that we,
Stress, I like your argument the best about easements. I do like the overall.
Sure.
right.
So,
Has been all
well, not everyone. So, or you wouldn't be.
Well, not everyone, but it is the principle that animates me to be involved in the neighborhood and to spend and to have learned the staggering amount that I've learned about the City of Atlanta zoning and planning processes, most of which have nothing to do with me, but personally, but we all benefit from appropriate following of the law and making changes slowly, deliberately, consciously, if at all, when we make them. And so that is part of it. And just in the same way that on Adair Avenue, on Virginia Circle right now, there are 3 houses in a row that appear to be about ready, 2 demolished and 1 more. But they're single family, and they're going to stay single family. One might or might not like the subsequent redesign of any given house. But the fact is, if we can do this, if we need to pay no attention to these matters, then they may as well put up a huge, thick, dense thing of condos there, and they can't do it because of the rule of law, and because of the fact that we're going to try to, not we here, but we, the whole community, will try to insist on it. So we are tired of, we have been disappointed by the negotiating process. And looking back, perhaps another approach might have been wiser, and I think we're here to consider one now. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to just add on to I came to the board after the destruction of the monument, and I had to sort of get up to speed on what had happened and what the monument was and what the significance was, and I would just add that I'm amazed at the how deliberate and how careful the board has, I assure you, nothing to do with me, but just in dealing with the homeowners and trying to, negotiate and come to the table, and I feel that I'm very, very confident and happy about the way the process has gone. And if anything, I think it's gone on way too long.
Well, and I think that has been.
Which I think goes to your point about the money. I mean, because I'm very sensitive to that too, and I take your point, and I think it's a good one. I just would echo what Peggy said and what Jack said about, we can't just allow this type of behavior, to go unchecked. So I take I just want to say I think your point is a good one, and I am conscious about money and how much money we're spending as well. But I'm very, very concerned about the behavior of the homeowners, and I think it has to be addressed.
So that we can continue to have discussion, but I do want to put a motion on the floor so that we can move forward. And the motion would be to ask Daniel to move forward with filing the suit. Daniel Moriarty, our lawyer, he's done much of the legwork before we went to mediation. He had already written a good bit of the language. So because we needed to have that in order to have a fruitful mediation. So that's a motion.
Second.
And can I add further discussion on that motion, which is, another part of, I think it's pretty obvious, but this is a very unique situation, and this is a significant public monument that actually doesn't have anyone's advocate. In certain situations, we come up with somebody built a garage over somebody else's property. We can advise them, but they're going to, if they get to legal action, they'll do it themselves. We need to be the champions. We are the Civic Association. Our mission is to support the neighborhood goals and the good of the neighborhood. And with the Todd family and us, we feel that it fits pretty squarely within the mission of the Civic Association. And I don't see another advocate that could do it any better than we could. It's not something we asked for, but here we are.
I'll add only to that we did explore with the city when this happened some suggestions that we went high up the police command asking for some suggestions about approaching this, and they said there's clearly something wrong, it appeared to them, but they thought civil remedies were going to be the solution. It was hard to enter the property of individuals who were excluding them from the property and were not requesting them to be there. And we looked for police reports of any damage and found none. So we really, believe you me, if you think somebody else should have dealt with this, if you happen to be a person that thinks that, we couldn't agree with you more, but I think Lola summed it up. There was no other person, it was just the family who lived out of town for the most part, and us, and our neighborhood. Yes, sir.
I think you should also keep in mind, though, that you can pursue this and you win. And it sets a precedent for egregious behavior in the neighborhood, and you'll get some mileage out of this for that. When something else of a historical fashion gets disturbed, you can point to this and say, we mean business. Put up a fence, let people in, something like that. It might be a silver.
So what would they do if somebody climbed the fence and used the public easement? Did they say what they would do? Like, for example, if I found their location and I decided I wanted to avail myself of the public easement, have they threatened anybody for any kind of arrest or anything like
No,
that?
let's be.
Oh, yeah.
Because the easement is still there regardless of how you choose to settle it or not.
No, let's be very clear here. We do not have any indication that they reacted that way at all.
Right, okay.
It was the fact that, like most of us, we're in the planning committee, we go out to look at sites and we arrange to meet the homeowner, and I never go on anybody's property without specific permission to be there. We have the two individuals who had visited the site, both of them before, who turned and left rather than cross a gate. No, I think the homeowner, I think that they have at various times responded and said that they would be accommodating to that. So that was why we thought the sign on the fence would be win-win. There you go. That'll solve this. That's why we really thought, if you look back at the tape of our meeting last January, you'll think you'll be reported in. Good news, all good, ready to go.
Mission
Great shape.
accomplished,
Mission
yeah.
accomplished. Check this one off the list. And that's it. So that's been our, yes, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
So one thing we had talked about, because it was a legal matter, we couldn't say, oh, let's fundraise, or let's try to think more creatively about not having these costs,
Or talk really openly about all the details when it was
so,
confidential.
yeah, so it was out of kind of respect for their privacy and for the process, that it was never like, oh, we could just fundraise money, and, we know a lot of people in the neighborhood care about the history and care about preserving it or recreating it if we need to. It just wasn't an option until now.
It's a tough one in order to try to keep the gate open to getting to find a way that work this way. Is a very tough one. Yes, ma'am.
So what are the plans now regarding the privacy of the individuals? If this becomes a lawsuit, then their names will be public.
It is
becomes
public.
That's correct.
The addresses
Easy enough to figure out.
and the book.
Yeah, if you want to find it,
Right.
find it.
I think you've been very generous with them, and they've not been very generous with you all, obviously.
Well, I appreciate that, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for the board, but as a 27-year in-town real estate litigator and mediator who does nothing but this and has litigated all kinds of things like this, 97% of all civil cases in Fulton County settle. There's certain triggers that cause them to settle, and it seems, in my own personal opinion, an unusual situation where you've sat down and reached an agreement and then, moved the bar forward and then sat down again in a formal setting at great expense to create an environment to settle it, and then reached out again. There's typically, in my experience, really only one option at that point if you want to succeed. And if you want to succeed in getting their attention, it's that you're kind of out of bullets at that point. I could give you statistics on how this will change once, if you all decide to proceed with litigation, how that will affect it, but I think it's pretty obvious. they started having the same discussion with themselves. How much is this gonna cost me? What's my exposure? What's the underlying merits of the easement case, and how quickly will that be resolved? And I have my own opinion about how I would advise them on that, but I won't share it with anybody. I just say that to say that there's nothing unsettlable about this case. It's a matter of motivating it along. What's your option?
Will it put a lien on their title so they couldn't dispose of the property or
No.
no? So it doesn't, it just simply they could sell it subject to this?
It's subject, right, yeah, they would sell it subject to a pending litigation over their title. It would, it's gonna have a genuine consequence, there's no question about it. There's no avoiding that. But other than, in my own opinion, doing the right thing. So, I've represented a lot of boards that would be much more closed, exclusive, and hostile than you guys. I give you great credit for that. It's exceptional. So whatever you do, you've done the right thing.
Any other comments? The motion, and Ms. Gilbert, did I hear you with the second on that? The motion is to authorize our lawyer to file suit regarding this matter seeking settlement. Thanks for coming, Mark.
No problem.
Nice
See you later.
All right.
Bye, all.
Is there any further discussion or comments from anyone? All those on the board that are in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. We are completed with this item, and if there's no other new business before us, I will declare the meeting adjourned at 8:31. Thank you, everybody, for coming.